Our next speaker is Reverend Frank Julian Gelly, who will be speaking on Imam Ali, hero of immanence and of transcendence. The Honourable Reverend is world-renowned for his religious dialogue and interfaith activities. Reverend Frank Julian has degrees in philosophy, theology, education, and Islamic studies from London and Oxford universities, and has delivered lectures around the world in addition to being a published author. Please welcome the Honourable Reverend with the praises of Ahlul Bayt. Aloud, Nare Salawat.
May I speak to you in the name of the one true God. In the Nahjul Balagha, we find Imam Ali saying, "I'm faced with men who do not obey when I order and do not respond when I call them." He goes on to reproach the miscreants. "What are you waiting to rise for the cause of Allah? I stand amongst you shouting, and I'm calling you for help, and you do not listen." One may be justified in reading this passage as expressing a sentiment that Imam Ali often felt let down by those who should have followed him. It can also be argued that the above quotations are echoed by another sentence attributed to the Imam, reported by the famous historian At-Tabari. I quote, "By Allah, since I became Khalifa, things have continually gone against me and diminished me, and I never attained anything I should." Thus speaks Tabari. So such statements pose a problem for us. Why was the Imam confronted by such terrible incomprehension and disobedience? This paper argues that the answer lies ultimately in the dimension of transcendence. The figure of Imam Ali should be understood in the light and context of transcendence. Transcendence is a word of Latin origin. If I had to render in Arabic, I would probably use the word al-akhirah. In English, the root meaning is going beyond. And its spiritual meaning is defined as going beyond all finite being and existence, hence designating God and his unique mode of relationship with the world. God transcends the world because he is other than the world, and his power is not limited or circumscribed to the realm of the finite, but by what is by contrast the immanent, the limited, the merely earthly. Now, of course, well, for example, in Christian theology, the world of immanence is also the indwelling part of the divinity. There is no ultimate separation because the world of space and time is created by God, so ultimately depending on God, but still there is a contrast. So, I'm giving reasons, I'm trying to look at reasons why Imam Ali was an Islamic hero, both in the realm of transcendence and that of immanence. Historian Hugh Kennedy writes that after Ali was appointed Khalifa, the inheritance was poisoned by the memory of his predecessor's death, although the Imam himself had no part in the killing of Uthman. Now, leaving aside the question, of course, whether Uthman really had a genuine right to be Khalifa instead of Ali, Tabari also writes that the Imam vehemently affirmed his innocence and swore personally to stab Uthman's killers unless Allah should will otherwise. In the Nahjul Balagha, I've got chapter and verse in my footnotes, but of course I'm not quoting them here, we find the Imam rebutting those who blamed him for killing Uthman. He says, "I am the contester against those who break away from faith and the opposer of those who entertain doubts." The Imam was defending the rights and privileges of early Muslims against the traditional Quraysh elite represented by Uthman, which were seeking to maintain control over the Ummah. Therefore, we understand how Imam Ali's political problem started, so to speak, because he sought to uphold genuine Islamic principles. And this is important because it relates to a key Quranic verse, it's Surah 17, Ayah 33, quoted in English, take not life which God has made sacred except for a just cause. If anyone is slain unjustly, we have given him authority to demand qisas or to forgive, but let him not exceed bounds in the matter of taking life. So the matter is, was Uthman killed lawfully or not? Well, one can at least observe that if it is the case that Uthman's caliphate was trampling over the rights of Muslims in general, then a juristic argument could in principle be made out for the justness of Uthman's killing. Now, this is a complex question. I can't go into it here. However, if Imam Ali as Khalifa was upholding the rights of the generality of the faithful against the privileges of a few, his position seems to me vindicated. Now, the next stage of the Battle of Siffin, and I apologize, much of this Islamic history is probably very well known to you, but I've got to develop my argument. So, a crucial test by the Imam of the Battle of Siffin. The Amir al-Mu'minin was leading his army against that of Muawiyah, the governor of Syria. It seems that the course of the battle was going well when enemy soldiers affixed verses of the Quran to their spears. It was meant as an appeal to arbitration or consultation to decide the issue. Both sides were presumably disturbed by the shedding of Muslim blood. However, it was also a wily stratagem by the Imam's enemies to prevent his military victory. Now, let me consider 3 points. First, the Khariji. Among those who turned away from Ali after Siffin, the Khariji, the secessionists, they accused the Imam of having done more than a tactical mistake, but to have committed a kabira, a grave sin. La hukma illa lillah. No decision save God's decision was a battle cry. However, in the Nahjul Balagha, we find the Imam ably responding to the Khariji. I quote, it is true, the verdict is from Allah, but these people say the governance is only for Allah. Through the ruler, meaning the Khalifa, tax is collected, enemies fought, roadways are protected, and the right of the weak is taken from the strong till the virtual enjoys peace. In other words, Imam Ali pointed out how government is necessary. The rule of a Khalifa for Muslims does not contradict the rule of God on earth, but it affirms it and makes it practically real and effective in the life of men. And here I could refer to a famous verse by St. Paul in Romans, where he speaks of rule ultimately being from God, but of course there is the question of the justness or rebellion against a tyrannical, indeed Taghouti government. Second, the charge of having accepted arbitration and hence or having compromised his authority by doing so. Some people say it was a mistake, for example, Ian Kennedy. Well, it appears it was a compromise, but since when is a compromise a mistake in politics, in human politics, or a sin? The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him, himself was criticized for accepting a compromise when necessary. Compromises were useful to him and eventually led to the Prophet's ultimate success. The art of making compromises is part of a statesman's skills. So it can be maintained that the Imam was not wrong and did not make a mistake in accepting a compromise arbitration after Siffin. He did the right thing. What perhaps was unlucky, and I'm going to discuss the matter of luck, was not the compromise itself, but the consequences that flowed from it, such as the disproportionate reaction of the Khariji. Moreover, when Ali agreed to arbitration, he certainly did not intend to bargain away his title of Amir al-Mu'minin, for which he was blamed. It was Abu Musa al-Ashari, Ali's arbitrator, but not chosen by him, who agreed later on to omit the title from the arbitration. Third, Nahjul Balagha has Imam Ali saying, we did not name people arbitrators, but we named Quran arbitrator. And the Nahjul Balagha quotes the Quran. And then, if you quarrel about anything, refer it to Allah and the Prophet. Surah 4:59. So the Imam does not deny the rightness of invoking the Quran, but he goes on to say in the same sermon that both by the criteria of the Quran and the Sunnah, a faithful interpreter would see that his own claim, or as Amir al-Mu'mineen, was just. Now, some key questions. I apologize if I sound very potentially critical, but you see what I'm leading up to. Was the Imam perhaps lacking in some political skills when deemed necessary to a statement? First, I would say that the Imam's conduct towards Aisha, for example, after the Battle of the Camel, suggests not just honor and generosity, but also a distinct far-sighted political acumen. The historian Tabari described how respectful Ali, the victor, acted towards Aisha. He behaved towards her in an exemplary manner. He indeed even punished two men who had abused Aisha verbally. He later had Aisha sent back to Mecca with an escort and all honors. And this argues for both generosity, honor, and political skills. So Ali was both spiritual and a possessor of political skills. His behavior after Sifni indicates that he indeed had a key quality in a statesman: flexibility, the skill to act wisely in contingent circumstances. Second, the Amir al-Mu'mineen is also a leader in the sense of being a commander of Muslim armies. In many battles, Ali displayed a courage which became legendary. Let us remember, Ali was never defeated in battle, but only fell under the dagger of an assassin while at prayer. Third, even if we were to concede that contingent historical events conspired against Ali's political aims, so that he was eventually a victim of events beyond his circumstances beyond his control, we should remember that political success is not necessarily a mark of spiritual, religious, or moral worth. Were that the case, would we have to say that Stalin was a remarkable example of a human being, a politician? Stalin, Britain's wartime chum, led the Soviet Union to political and military victory in World War II and died in his bed. Yet he was a monster, a Tahuti monster, who murdered millions of people. So political success cannot be the ultimate benchmark. Was the Imam just unlucky? Some people say he was unlucky. Now, there are passages in Nahjul Balagha in which the Imam seems to express a feeling of that kind. I quote, "I looked around, I found no one to shield me, protect me, except members of my family." So the category of bad luck is a questionable one for a believer in the supremacy of transcendence. The philosopher Immanuel Kant actually denied that the moral worth of a man could be affected by contingent events, even by misfortune. I quote, Kant says, "A good will is good not because of what it affects or it accomplishes. It is good only because of its volition. It is good in itself. Even if by special disfavor of fortune it should lose, it will still shine like a jewel as something which has its full worth in itself. Usefulness or fruitlessness can neither add anything to this worth nor take away from it." So, misfortune places some limitations on human empirical endeavor, but we can never force a righteous person to commit an unrighteous act. The Greek philosopher Plato has Socrates arguing it is worse to suffer wrong than to do wrong. And the Neoplatonist Plotinus taught not even an excruciating death under torture can rob a just man of his virtue. Therefore, here's my point, no putative bad luck can be an insurmountable impediment to leading a virtuous and noble life, like indeed the Imam did. He was a ruler according to the best principle of Islam, and indeed, as I'm sort of bringing close to Newcastle, as Nahjul Balagha shows, had a great sense of personal humility and asceticism. So a category in the light of a category of transcendence, we can see the so-called bad luck is irrelevant. And lastly, what counts as failure? What counts as success? First, observe, and not all your human cultures consider certain kind of failure as ultimately bad. Traditional Japanese culture, for example, provides the notion of nobility of failure. The so-called failed hero is not despised among the Japanese. On the contrary, he's a highly revered person. Such a hero is one who pits himself against the odds, and even when they defeat him, he's honorably glorified by his culture. Hence, we see in Japan the cult of a failed hero. Maybe you may think this is a romantic idea. It is not just a romantic, because I think it is underlined by the category of transcendence. What appears as failure in the eyes of men is somewhat very different from a perspective of divine. Hence, we begin to approach a true insight into the deep significance of Ali's personality when we refer back to God, to the transcendent, what is not merely contingent and temporal, but necessary and eternal. Success should not simply be measured by the standards of the worldly, the contingent, but by reference to the latter, the nature of the divine. In this sense, Ali, as the title of my paper, is genuinely a hero of transcendence. It is also important not to lose sight of the fact that the Imam was not in charge of simply any secular polity, but of the Islamic State. The Khilafah encompasses normative, religious, and ethical criteria. So, as Ian Kennedy points out, how Ali's rules stress both the importance of equality, as my illustrious predecessor mentioned, the equality of believers, and the religious role of a caliph and the imam. So, this basic notion of justice, al-adl. And the evaluation should include first Ali's highly undoubted Islamic piety, a practice that straddles both my categories of down here and up there, immanence and transcendence. Significantly, Ali said, I'm sure this is well known to you, to have been one of the 10 people to whom the Prophet Muhammad promised paradise. Or Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Second, we should keep in mind Ali's sense of justice and his commitment to the cause of less advantaged Muslims. And on this latter point, I mean, Ian Kennedy has written a book which I studied during my recent MA in Islamic Studies, which is about the Caliphate. So I'm quoting him a bit. Kennedy states that concern for Islamic government and for the problems of underprivileged Muslims was to be the hallmark of the appeal of Ali and his descendants throughout the early Islamic history. Thirdly, evidence of Imam Ali's deep success is also amply indicated by his high status as supreme Muslim hero post-mortem, both amongst the Shia communities and indeed amongst the Sufi tradition. And he exists for important texts like Nahjul Balagha is a further proof of that. I don't like telling anecdotes, it's not very academic, but I've got to tell you an anecdote. I was once on a tube platform in Hammersmith in London. I had a Tissue of Arabic book in my hand. It was a nice man who was going by. He said, "Are you learning Arabic?" You dressed as obviously Muslim. And I said, "Yes." He said, "I can teach you. I'm from Yemen." "Okay." I said, "Well, I've got lots of Muslim friends, many of whom are indeed Shia." He said, "Look, whatever you do, keep away from the Shia." So I said, I'm going to tell them. I've done so before. And I refer to Ibn Nahjul Balagha, following the killing of Uthman. The arbitration which followed Siffin entail a set of new problems and challenges. However, I've argued that on the whole the Imam dealt with them ably, giving proof of political, military and pragmatic acumen. For example, his conduct towards the Prophet's widow Aisha after the Battle of Camel suggests both wisdom and magnanimity. Thus, it would not be correct to judge that Ali was in any sense lacking in political ability. So I've also looked at the notion of success and luck in the light of the career of the Imam. My paper has concluded that success should not be measured only by reference to the earthly, to what is done below, but reference to God. I mean, we believe in God. We are not pagans. We are not animals. We don't believe that it's solely about down here. It's God. So not just human criteria, but crucially by divine categories. And also, no idea of misfortune or bad luck can ultimately affect the moral or spiritual status of a figure of Ali ibn Abi Talib. The evidence appears that he saw himself and his rule as above all as defending the rights, prerogatives and equality of the multitudes of Muslims, as opposed to a privilege of the Banu Umayyah cabal. In this sense, I think we are justified in calling Ali a hero, not just of transcendence, but of immanence of his world here below and of the world above, insofar as that he fought for justice for the underprivileged and ordinary believers. In the end, of course, the ultimate, full, complete truth on these matters, as indeed the Nahjul Balagha admits, is known only to God. Allahu Alam. Thank you so much.